Live from SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Welcome to this evening's episode of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo and thank you for tuning in. On the show tonight, we'll start with a developing story. The township of Diepsloot, north of Johannesburg, is on tenterhooks after protesters clashed with police shortly after the departure of the police minister and the National Police Commissioner in the area. We'll take you there live for an update from our reporter on the ground. The EFF tells us why it held marches in Mpumalanga and the Western Cape today and chose billionaire Anton Rupert's farms and business properties for their protests. And days after she appeared on this show to account for not spending 205 million rands that are supposed to build and repair schools, the head of the Eastern Cape Education Department has been suspended. We'll bring you the full story. All of that coming up when the Watchdog starts, which is right now. The EFF wants to know the number of properties businessman Johan Rupert owns. It also wants to know how he acquired those properties. The demands were made during a march to one of Rupert's properties in Malelane, Mpumalanga. EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu led the march to the famous Leopards Creek. Party leader Julius Malema led a similar march to the offices of Remgro Limited in Stellenbosch. There he demanded back land which left indigenous people dispossessed during and post-colonialism.
EFF members gathered outside Leopards Creek. The property boasts of a golf club among world-class facilities, but the Red Berets are not here to play golf. They are demanding full disclosure from the owners of the property, the Rupert's family.
We as black people, we are still a defeated and conquered nation. And we are conquered by the white colonial settlers. And the evidence of that is shown by the fact that these settlers continue to own the land, they continue to own the minerals, they continue to own our animals. We have not regained anything. They gave us political power in 1994, but now they are taking control of the entire economy. Even the small sectors that used to belong to the state, they are beginning to take bit by bit. You see, they are in the process of privatizing Eskom now.
The resort on the periphery of the Kruger National Park is a playground for the rich and the famous. Farm dwellers adjacent to the resort have accused the Rupert family of destroying the graves of their relatives and making it impossible to perform ritual.
We were forced to remove the remains of our loved ones with our hands and of people who were buried in the farm.
As we speak, the people who have buried their loved ones at Leopard Creek, they want to perform rituals on those graves, but they are told there are no graves. They say if we want to do that, we must provide proof that we have graves there, which is unreasonable.
In Stellenbosch, EFF supporters marched to the offices of Remgro, the investment holding company chaired by Rupert, where a memorandum of demands was handed over. The party says the day Jan van Riebeeck landed in Cape Town in 1652 heralded the beginning of indigenous people's dispossession and destitution.
This company of Rupert owns everything. It owns ABSA, it owns FNB, Standard Bank. If they don't want you, you will never own a bank. How can the Rupert just own everything? All of us here, when we woke up, all of us without faith, we used a product of the Rupert. Either a toothpaste. When I say toothpaste, I sound sophisticated. Colgate. Or toothbrush. Or a soap. Whatever you want to think of, these ones have got their hands in it. The insurance companies, they are there. The wines, they are there. The luxury goods, they are there. Cheap or expensive, they are there.
The EFF has called for the redistribution of land without compensation for the benefit of South Africans.
We want the farms to be given to black people. You've got enough land, Rupert. Start releasing some of it voluntarily now, before the land revolution visits you. All those white people who have a lot of land, lot of properties, lot of wealth, please start sharing it with the people of South Africa, because they are losing their patience. But we've got one individual who owns everything, who owns the banks, the land, who owns everything, and is using their financial muscle to even buy things from government which otherwise were supposed to benefit everyone. We cannot allow inequality to continue in the manner that it has been here in South Africa. We are not scared of the Ruperts, we are not scared of the Oppenheimers, we are not scared of the white capitalist establishment.
The Ruperts have been given 14 days to respond to the EFF demands. Nhlamulo Mabasa, SABC News, Malelane, Mpumalanga.
Sam Matiase, MP, is a member of the EFF's Central Command team, and he joins us now. Mr. Matiase, good evening. Thanks very much for your time this evening.
Good evening to viewers at home.
Why the Ruperts?
Well, the Ruperts are the criminals benefited from the theft of land with the arrival of colonial country in 1652. So if you have to identify and look who are the real thieves, Johan Rupert is a prime suspect, is a thief, and that's why the focus is on him.
Who are the others?
Well, he knows his ilk. The Oppenheimers and many white settlers in this country are the benefactors and the beneficiaries of land theft, which have left African masses dispossessed of land, and have no means for self-sustainment. So this day, the 6th of April, the most important day in the history of the struggle against colonialism and dispossession in the country. It's an important day that must be declared a land day, for on which the day we have to mobilize and conscientize the masses of our people to know that it is on this day that they were rendered. People who have got no means whatsoever to make a living in the country of their forefathers.
We'll get into the significance of the day in a moment, but I'm still keen to know why you didn't target the other suspects or prime suspects and only focused on the Ruperts.
Well, the Ruperts owns almost half of the Western Cape. The whole land around Stellenbosch, all prime land in this country, is owned by the Ruperts. The Ruperts are the oligarchs of land ownership, of monopoly industry, monopoly over various industries, monopoly over land. And if you have to find someone that symbolizes the theft of the land in this country, you don't look anywhere else other than to look the Ruperts, because all other who own land as white people, though they occupy huge tracts of land, which they have got illegally, they are small players in the bigger scheme of things in respect of monopoly of industries, monopoly of land ownership, and so on. It doesn't mean that if we don't focus on them on this particular day, they are off the radar. They are just as guilty, they are just as part of the criminal syndicate that rendered African people landless, just as Johan Rupert and his family.
So it was largely symbolic because of what they represent.
It's both symbolic, Vio, and it's also a point that underlined that Johan Rupert, as a beneficiary of land theft, which was enshrined in 1652 on the day by Jan van Riebeeck, represents the theft of land, and therefore is symbolic in so many ways, and all efforts must be directed at exposing the land that is owned, and the fact that he's the chief suspect in the theft of land, and which has rendered African masses landless and have no means for self-sustenance.
Was this a once-off protest, or is this only the beginning?
Well, it's a continuing struggle, and the South African land is restored back to the African masses. All what we want to do, just as we have done in the past on this day, is to increase the political land consciousness amongst our people, so that on this day, and just as in many other days, African masses know that the evil of landlessness that they suffer today was done on this day, and we shall continue to raise the land question amongst our people and rally our people in ensuring that they fight for the return of the land and continue to mobilize and instigate and agitate our people to occupy any land wherever they deem necessary. So it's a continuing program until the whole of our South African land is restored back to African masses by any means necessary, including expropriation of land without compensation, which is a prime economic freedom fight.
Now, the issue of the lands, one of your 7 pillars. To someone who asks, how would you describe your performance so far from the time you entered the political scene on the land ticket among others? How would you describe your performance?
Well, there's no doubt that our freedom fighters since 2010 formation, it has brought meaningful changes in the country. It has brought to the center of national debate, discourse around the land question in a manner which has never been seen. Our people, in their numbers, in their multitudes, continued to have faith and trust in the movement, as this is the only movement that speaks truth to power. This is the only movement that takes the battles where it matters most and is growing in leaps and bounds. We are continuing to enjoy the overwhelming support of our people, and our people have got faith and trust in us, and they are certain that through the kind of the leadership, through the kind of the program the organization is undertaking and leading, is guaranteed that the land in our lifetime shall be brought back in the complete ownership of the masses of our people, so that the masses of our people's dignity can be restored.
Expand on those, for me, if someone out there who perhaps hasn't been paying as much attention as perhaps journalists who who are in the political sphere do, remind them of the very specific things that you're saying you've brought into play, the things that you've done that no one had done before the EFF came into the picture.
Well, look, it is the EFF that in 2018 brought the motion for Parliament to amend Section 25 of the Constitution. And it is that motion which was presented by the Commander-in-Chief, the president of our movement, that has heralded in Parliament putting together an ad hoc committee of Section 25 to make it possible for the expropriation of land without compensation. However, that motion was amended by the party that you and I know that is afraid of tackling the land question, is the party that pays lip service to the land question, is the party that pays allegiance to the British crown, is the party that serves at the behest of the ruling class, the Ruperts of this world, the Oppenheimer of this world, and all of them. So that program of amending the constitution was led by the economic freedom fighters. It has mobilized thousands and thousands of our people who went out in public hearings to express their immediate demand that the land must be expropriated without compensation. And that program, as you would know, been undermined, betrayed by the former liberation movement, the ruling party, that, as I said earlier, serves at the behest of the interest of the ruling class. Furthermore, all over the country, our people have identified land, they have occupied land. In Kayamnandi, in Stellenbosch, there is an informal settlement which our people, through the leadership of the EFF, have identified and occupied. And that settlement, which is yet to be formalized by the racist DA government, is called Azania. And in many other places across the country, our people have placed themselves in land which they've been necessary to occupy. And at least for the first time, our people who are landless, who are unemployed, who live in squalor conditions, have at least a piece of land to call their home, where as it rains like this, at least they can hide their heads. These are some of the achievements that we have made throughout the country.
Well, I mean, as you yourself have just said, I mean, the amendments to Section 25 of the Constitution, that whole hoo-ha about that, I mean, that has fallen flat, thanks to the party you say is only keen to play lip service to this issue. But fact of the matter is that you haven't been able to carry that through. So the question then is what next? And I'm asking this on the back of what things you know. People have been saying that actually it is possible and easy to make some really serious inroads by using existing legislation, by using the Constitution as it stands. And shouldn't that be the focus, instead of wasting a lot of time, and energy on something that clearly, well, by the look of things, as long as the ANC is in the majority, is something that's not going to happen, certainly not anytime soon?
Well, two things ought to happen. Firstly, is the masses of our people to realize that there's only one party that speaks truth to power. We're committed in ensuring land is brought under the ownership of our people through the state custodianship, and that part is the economic freedom fighter. And therefore, it's incumbent upon them to use their vote wisely and vote for the party that has demonstrated for the last 9 years its commitment to fight and to revolution to restore land back to them. In restoring the land is to restore their dignity. That's the first. Second, there's no way that the state, which failed in the last 27 years to use existing legislation, to use the same legislation to expropriate land and address the issue of land hunger and answer people, which failed to do so in the last 27 years. Which legislation can address the question other than amending Section 25 of the Constitution, pass appropriate legislation to ensure that land is expropriated. That's the only route going forward. And there will be no shortcuts. There will be no amount of telling lies than to tell our people it's only through expropriation of land without compensation, which must be enacted in an appropriate constitutional amendment process and ensure that land is brought back under the ownership of the state on behalf of the masses of our people. That's the only way to go, and the economic freedom fighters is determined and committed to ensure that through revolution that is realized in our lifetime.
Mr. Matiase, thanks very much for your time this evening. He is a member of parliament, but also a member of the EFF Central Command team. Today, the party were gathered outside Leopards Creek in Mpumalanga, a property that boasts a golf course and other world-class facilities. They were there, of course, to register their dissatisfaction, well, in fact, to mark the day in which Jan van Riebeeck landed in the Cape in 1652. There was, of course, another protest in Stellenbosch. There it was led by the party's leader, Julius Malema. They went to the offices of Remgro Limited in Stellenbosch there to make the same point that the march that was led by the EFF's deputy president in Mpumalanga sought to make. They have given the Ruperts an ultimatum to 14 days to respond to their demands. We'll see how that one pans out. After the break, we'll take you live to Diepsloot, and that is where tempers have flared on the back of a visit by the Minister of Police and the National Commissioner of Police after the community, the residents there, declared a 2-day shutdown protesting a very high crime rate, which they say the police are not attending to. We'll tell you what happened throughout the day, up to the point where police had to be brought in and stun grenades were fired, and what's most likely to happen next, certainly on the account of some of the role players and the things they have had to say. That and more coming up after this short ad break. Don't go away. Welcome back. A 2-day shutdown of Diepsloot aimed at highlighting the soaring crime rate in the area turned ugly this afternoon. Police fired stun grenades shortly after Police Minister Begicele and the National Police Commissioner General Sihlahle Masemula addressed the community there. Well, Mbali, our colleague, is in Diepsloot and joins us now for the latest. Mbali, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. I want us to, take, a few steps, back. Fill us in first as to why this community decided on this 2-day shutdown in the first place.
Good evening for you. Now, you'll understand that it was an incident that took place over the weekend where there was a number of people who died in one location. This then led community members feeling unsafe, feeling as though the police station in the community was not capacitated enough to address the challenges within its community, and then staged what they called a shutdown of the area, calling on the police station to be recapacitated and calling on the tactical unit to be deployed, and also raising issues of undocumented migrants, saying that they are concerned with the level of crime in the community, which they have somewhat attributed to the number of documented migrants within the community. They are calling on Home Affairs to do its work in terms of ensuring that they enforce the laws against those who are in the country illegally. There is a clip just waiting here a little bit earlier from the Minister of Police just giving a report back to community members, making various promises, including that he will be back on Friday to ensure that those who are staying in Diepsloot are legal within the country, and also made promises to add a number of vehicles as well as additional police officials from the tactical unit. Here's that clip.
Well, we heard what the community are crying about, and we say we are here, we are going to make those resources available. We heard that there were over 50 cars, and now they have dwindled up to 6 or so. And as the minister said, we are putting extra vehicles in this area with effective from tonight, special forces, including POP. And we say we are not going to put them for a week. We will come to the community and talk and agree. They will be in this area until, again, we agree with the community as to when we will be withdrawing them. But with regard to issue of immigrants, I think the minister dealt with it. We'll have Home Affairs to come and take those that are not supposed to be within this community.
Sombali, promises there from the National Police Commissioner that they are going to bring in special forces. They are going to bring in more vans. They are going to go back to the community on Friday and give them an update of things that they would have done or will be putting in place to try and address their concerns. Earlier, you spoke to a ward councillor there who told you in uncertain terms that in spite of all those promises both the minister and the National Police Commissioner made, they didn't, they didn't believe them. They didn't trust them. They don't think that the police commissioner and the minister are giving them, or they just think that they are making more empty promises.
Certainly, Vuyo, what you saw on the ground was a community that was somewhat skeptical and that felt somewhat let down following that visit from government officials in the area, and seemingly not convinced that the promises that have been made to them will come to fruition. You would have heard I heard particularly one lady saying that she doesn't believe that this is happening because initially the police minister Bheki did announce that he would be visiting the location in the area where those dead bodies were discovered, and he in fact did do that. But what happened while the minister was driving to that particular location is that a group of residents who, after seeing Operation Dula leader Nhlanhla Lux Mohlawi, then led what seemed to be a march all the way to that area where they had hoped, and this was confirmed by that ward councillor that we spoke to a little bit earlier on, where it was hoped that one of those Operation Dudula-like operations would then get underway. And it seems as though the expectation from community members was that it was going to be led by the police minister as well as other government officials today, and they would not wait until Friday to carry this operation out. You saw people, I was on the ground, you saw people carrying sticks, and the crowd that was on the ground and the sticks they carried and the manner in which they walked was reminiscent of political parties, back in the days before 1994. So those were the crowds that went out, and you would have seen on the ground some of them hitting and banging those stalls that they found on the side of the road. But then other members who were there then warning them, asking them not to do that, saying that this is a peaceful operation. They're just walking there. But after some time, it seemed as though when they saw that officials are leaving, they then got despondent and disappointed at the fact that, what they had hoped would happen, which was to go in and check on the status of those who are residing in that area in terms of their status, in terms of their legalities, in terms of being to be in the country. They were disappointed, and then that led to clashes where police had to then fire stun grenades as well as fire tear gas in order to disperse that crowd. That's what we've gotten from the ward councillor, who explained to us the sentiments on the ground. He also warned that, while things may seem calm where we are, it seems as though there are some hot spots within the area. It's unclear who's leading those operations in parts of Diepsloot, where people are standing by and ready to go into certain residents in certain spaces in order to check the status of some of those staying there. You heard the minister a little bit earlier on warning those who have rented out their residence and places their residents to undocumented migrants. We spoke to MEC for Community Safety, asking if they will then be legislating around that, saying that, that is a lengthy process, but it is something that they might consider in the future, but did warn that, it's not an issue that they can take up all on their own. Now, after that, almost as though, it was a response to what residents wanted, we understood that during another crossing, we saw a Home Affairs vehicle driving by, where my camera colleague Herbert Mamela chased after that. And upon chasing after it, he realized that there was an operation by Home Affairs officials that is underway, where they are going into various residents and just checking the status of some people. We understand they've brought those people back here at this police station, and it's more than 7 people who have been brought in on suspicions of being undocumented migrants within the country. We understand that some of the questions that were asked, as to, to ascertain their status, is they did say that they were South African, but upon a further inquiry, where they were asked to show their identification documents or state their ID numbers, they couldn't, and also state, the place where they were born and the place where they went to school. So these are some of the questions that were being asked on the ground that led to those individuals being brought in to be detained and potentially deported out of the country if they cannot ascertain their status and ascertain that they are in the country legally. We understand that these operations are going to continue throughout the night, and this is the first leg of that operation, as we understand based on what we are getting on the ground. These vehicles will be heading out, and it seems as though it will be in our best interest to chase after them if we are to get those kind of details and get that kind of information. I understand that there are some visuals that are probably rolling right now as we speak, where there are people lying on the ground who have been taken in and brought to this police station.
Any idea, Mbala, as to how many people may have been arrested over the past few hours from the police behind you?
Well, it's unclear It's unclear how many people have been arrested, but we do understand that at the time when the clashes took place, we understand that there were some individuals who were arrested, but we haven't really quite been able to confirm the number of people who have been arrested during that operation or during those clashes when individuals when people just learned that, officials were leaving and that operation that they'd hoped would be carried out did not indeed take place.
A couple of quick ones, Mbala, before I let you go. The first one is, have you been able to establish from, the residents as to why they believe that foreign nationals are responsible for exacerbating the high crime rate in Diepsloot?
Well, we did speak to some residents on the ground, and I think particularly because the area where the bodies were discovered is an area where, as confirmed by the MEC for community safety, is an area where, residents who once stayed in informal settlements were then moved into RDP houses, and upon being moved there and getting that RDP house, it seems as though those structures were not removed, but instead were then occupied by other people and obviously used as rental income. And it seems as though that rental income comes from renting out to undocumented, sometimes comes from renting out the premises to undocumented migrants. And it seems as though the area is seemingly dominated by undocumented. That's what they're saying. These are all unconfirmed claims by residents, and hence the reasoning for what they say is that they are responsible because the area is one of those areas where people who stay there are generally renting out those units, and the home at which the bodies were discovered was occupied by an undocumented resident, which then gave rise to a perception in the community that they are somewhat responsible for the spike in the rape, because some of the placards that they had spoke about the rape and so on. So these are all allegations, and I must confirm that these are allegations that are brought by the public, or things that are said by the public community members in here in Diepsloot. And also unconfirmed reports at this stage, given that these are just, sentiments that are on the ground and shared by those on the ground.
Quick last one. After you mentioned the MEC for Community Safety, Faith Mazibuko, she said earlier that she was going to send in the Tactical Response Unit, Amaberete. Are they there, or do we know when they will arrive if they're not there yet?
Well, we haven't quite seen them. I think this was also, she was echoing Police Minister Begicele's comments, who said the police officials that you see right here before you are going to remain here. And she did say that they hope, because the question on many people's minds is that, how long were they going to be on the ground until? And she said they were going to be on the ground until, the situation and calm has been, restored in the area, and the situation is not as tense as we see it. Right now, I cannot say that I can see them, but maybe we would need to drive into the community in order to see police visibility and police presence within the community. Well, of course, we've also got nothing to compare it with, because, we don't know what a normal day in Diepsloot is, but if in the event that we were to drive through, we would obviously see police on the ground, but it wouldn't be, a confirmation of the fact that, there's a higher police visibility or not, based on the fact that we don't have, something to compare it to. However, right now there is a huge number of police officials, but also media officials. A lot of media personnel are here, are camping out here to get the latest on this story.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you very much, Mali. Thank you for keeping us updated on that situation there in Diepsloot. Tense after the police minister arrived there, addressed the community, but when the community wasn't satisfied with what they said, then hell broke loose, and then police had to fire stun grenades. But as Mbali was saying, the situation remains calm, at least for now. Hopefully it'll stay like that until tomorrow. The minister and the commissioner are due to go back to Diepsloot on Friday. They promised the residents that that's what they would do. to tell them what is being done to address their concerns. This after the community decided on a 2-day shutdown to protest against a soaring crime rate after the deaths of many people over the weekend. That number, of course, not confirmed. One of the numbers that are being branded about is 7 people have died, but that's unconfirmed. We'll see how the situation evolves over the next few days. Now, days after she appeared on this show to account for not spending 205 million rands that are supposed to build and repair schools, the head of the Eastern Cape Education Department has been suspended. We'll bring you that story after this short break. Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane has suspended the Provincial Superintendent General of the Department of Education, Dr. Naledi Mbude. Mabuyane placed Mbude on precautionary suspension, he says, after the department came under the spotlight due to the delayed supply of learner support material and the subsequent court order regarding this matter. She's also being blamed for the non-payment of education assistance last year and the loss of a 205 million rand conditional infrastructure grant from the National Department due to underspending. Mbude has decided to challenge her suspension, though, through a court of law. She was appointed to the department in June last year, following the death of the then HOD, Themba Kojana.
Eastern Cape Premier Oscar Mabuyane is unhappy with the state of affairs in the Provincial Education Department. He is of the view that the department is in a crisis and needs intervention. He says a turnaround strategy is on the cards to deal with the challenges plaguing the department.
If that department is in chaos, it is in crisis from a leadership point of view, then I can tell you the entire administration will actually be in chaos. So we are addressing that, and we can't rest on our laurels and fold our arms and watch when things are not going right. We are intervening in that department. We have already made a clear indication by activating or invoking the Section 18 of the PFMA, Office of the Premier, Treasury, coming together to ensure that we support the department and be able to tackle the challenges that are in the department.
Dr. Naledi Mbude has vowed to clear her name. She believes she is the victim of ANC politics ahead of the provincial conference later this month. She says the rivalry between Oscar Mabuyane and Public Works MEC Babalo Matikizela ahead of the conference is what led to her suspension.
I've been hearing this from the beginning of the year, that because the Department of Education has shifted some projects to the Department of Public Works, therefore the animosity or the rivalry between the politics of the province is what is affecting me. I want to believe that now that this has happened, because I thought that this was the initial letter was about performance, which is something that is governed by the Public Service Act and not by any looking into the situation and deciding whether it is misconduct or it is performance, because with performance you don't investigate performance, you assess performance.
Mbude is expected to file court papers before the end of this week. Abongile Yankees, SABC News, East London.
Well, the Superintendent General was on the show last week, and we did ask him as to why 205 million had to be returned to Treasury, or in fact was not sourced, and why this money, which was essential given the backlogs that province has. I mean, you still have mud schools there. You have lots of schools that need a lot of repair work. And here's how she answered that question.
The money was not given to the department. It's not money that could not be spent. The Division of Revenue Act, the DORA, says the infrastructure grant, once you are unable to spend what you have, any other installment that's supposed to come afterwards is withheld. So the explanation that the money was not spent in the Eastern Cape is not correct.
Okay, maybe technically, in other words, the money was not in your bank account.
The money did not come to
for all intents and purposes.
Yes.
That's money you were given, and I mean that's money you had access to. That's money you should have used but didn't use.
No, I must repeat this. That last installment was not given to the province because the money that was given by the National Department was not spent to 100% by nearing the end of the last quarter. So the money was never given to the Eastern Cape, it was withheld.
Confusing, isn't it? And I'm sure we haven't heard the last on this story. As you heard earlier, she is taking the matter to court. We'll see what happens after that. Well, that brings us to the end of our show this evening. Do join us again tomorrow night, same time. Have a good night.